Okay, so you know, sorry, I'm just gonna say it. I know this will probably not go down well, but so be it. I want to briefly speak on infidelity, and I will disclose from now that in my past, yeah, I have um committed like infidelity, adultery, whatever you want to call it, in a past relationship that I was in. So, if anyone turns and says there's bias in what I'm saying, then fair enough, that's to be expected. In that relationship where I did cheat, um, I'm just gonna be just brutally honest. I clearly did not love the person. I did not respect the person, hence why I cheated. So with that, for the longest time, I couldn't understand when people would say that they loved their partner, their spouse, but yet they cheated because I was going based on myself knowing that I didn't love the person who I was with, nor did I respect the person that I was with. So I struggled for years to like understand when people said that, you know, they loved their person, but yet they cheated on them. Because as far as I was concerned, if a man or woman cheats on their partner, that automatically means they do not love them. As old as I've gotten older and my friendship circle changed, my environment changed, where I got to meet and converse with a diverse variety of people in relationships, people who were in relationships, people who were married, people who are now divorced or going through separation, speaking to both men and women of various ages and stages in their lives. And through these conversations that I've had with all of them, you know, and just hearing their stories and the things that they either been through or put others through, I slowly began to understand why people in long term relationships, especially, and that includes marriage, where you have two individuals who truly love each other. They're in love with one another, but one of them steps out of that relationship, and in some cases, both of them step out of their relationship, but yet they still love each other. Yet, you know, they would never dream of leaving that relationship. But somewhere along the way, or sometimes even before they said I do and walked down the aisle, there were key things that needed to be addressed, that needed to be spoken about that wasn't, you know. And through conversations, I come to realize that there's a lot of people, you know, and even I was to include myself in past relationships. I myself am not married, but I can recall certain relationships that had been in the past where there were definitely conversations that needed to be had that wasn't had. I can recall times where there was something that was really bothering me, but I withheld it because I was concerned about it causing conflict, causing problems. But by me being silent, it actually caused more problems than if I had just spoken up at that time. And that's what I've realized with a lot of couples. There are conversations that couples are not willing to have, especially prior to getting married and having children. Um, and in these conversations, these issues are brought up after the fact, whereas it should have been addressed long before any proposal, long before any I do's, and definitely long before any children came into the mix. You got other couples where they've allowed too much outside influence to dictate their relationship. Too many friends, too many relatives, too many co workers, or whatever other relations they may have with other people to have a say in their relationship, to dictate how their relationship should go, you know. And in some instances, because they've told so many negative things about their spouse or their partner to their people, you know, now it's like that added pressure to end that relationship, because even if they themselves don't want to end it, because you know, they've said so many negative things and now they're kind of stuck, they don't know what to do. You got other situations where and this is a mistake that is very easy to make, when you have a friend or an associate of the opposite sex, and because you're not around them the way you would be around, or way people would be around their spouse or their boyfriend or their girlfriend, um, they make a very unfair comparison, because the person who they're with for, like, let's say like maybe 2 to 3 hours or several hours throughout the day, they deem that person as, oh, perfect, or, you know, exactly what they're looking for in a man and woman that they're not getting from their partner back at home. They still love the person that they're with, but this person over here is like ticking all the boxes, but they forget that the same person, you know, they're not having to deal with all the negatives that come with them, that their partner at home or their husband or wife at home deals with on a daily basis. You know, who's to say that if they had to deal with the same thing that their partner back home had to deal with, would they really act any different from their partner, from their spouse, or would they act even worse? You know, situations like that, you know, is very easy if one's not careful to step out of their relationship if they feel like what they're not getting at home, they can get elsewhere. Now, is that right? Absolutely not. But the reality is, it happens. So we can debate all day about what's right or what's wrong. We're not talking about what's right or what's wrong. We're talking about real things that happen in relationships. And instead of going back and forth about why someone shouldn't do this or why someone shouldn't do that, we should more be thinking of, okay, acknowledging that these things can happen and how can these things be avoided. That's the conversation that we should really be having, because going back and forth about, oh, they're wrong to do this, they're wrong to do that, it's counterproductive. We know this. That doesn't actually solve the problem though. And I honestly feel like if more people were transparent with the person that they were with about any issues that they have, and then when I say transparent, I'm not just talking about issues that they have with their partner, but also acknowledge and take accountability for where they fall short in their relationship. When their partner, when their husband or wife is speaking to them on certain issues, instead of being quick to like get into defense mode, they actually listened, you know, and any part where they genuinely don't see what the person's talking about, ask them to actually present an example so that they can understand. You know, if it's where you have to go counseling, and do that. If it's something like you guys both pray together, like continuously pray to God and seek counsel from God, then do that. But the fact is, most people don't do that. And one thing that I'm learning as of late, you know, if we all went back to like the word of God, you know, when it speaks on like marriage and stuff like that. I know there's like a back and forth with people when it comes to that, but if people actually took the time out of their day to like really truly read and understand it, you know, there wouldn't be so many failed marriages today. In fact, you know, there'll be certain marriages that never would have come about. Reason being because they would have realized from early on that the man or the woman that they're with is not the man or woman that God has assigned to be their husband. So not only would there be less failed marriages, there would be less marriages to begin with, because those who are in marriages, they would be single until God brings the man or woman that he has assigned for them to marry. And in other instances, not everyone's going to get married. That's just a reality. Though, yes, the word of God does say, does encourage marriage, especially when it comes to fornication, that it's better to marry than to be single and fornicate, right? The reality is not everyone is supposed to get married. That's just the fact truth. So there would be less divorce, therefore more marriages, successful marriages in one sense. But on the flip side, there'll be less marriages because one, not everyone is at the stage that God needs them to be at for them to be with their assigned husband or wife. And then two, is not everyone who is even supposed to be married to begin with. So the state of marriage would be so different. The divorce rate would be nowhere near as high as it is now. Now, I'm not going to go on and act as if that I know what the statistics are for every single country, because obviously from country to country it will vary, right? But the divorce rate will not be so high. If people truly took the time to understand the word of God when it comes to relationship, when it comes to marriage, when it comes to the roles and the expectations and that comes with marriage, and the willingness to actually to stand and to fight for the marriage that they're in, for the relationship they're in, if there was like more open communication and a willingness to hear, the willingness to acknowledge when we are wrong, the willingness to take accountability in our relationship, even if we are the ones that are getting hurt. If we played any role, no matter how great or how small, if we played any role in our hurt, take acknowledgement and accountability for that, there would be less adultery, less infidelity, less divorce. Granted, I was strictly talking about infidelity, but infidelity in marriages can lead to divorce. So I'm going to include that too. The state of relationships today are so poor. But I have a better understanding from the things that I've seen, things that I've experienced, as to why so many people, men and women, because I'm not going to act like it's just men that step out on their wives and their girlfriends. Women are just as guilty of stepping out on their husbands, of stepping out on their boyfriends. So I hold both men and women accountable when it comes to infidelity. But yeah, it's not surprising, because too many people are afraid to have honest conversation. Too many people are way too prideful to hear or be told that they're wrong in a situation. Too many people run away from accountability. And if you're someone who runs from accountability, things will never get fixed. Things will never be resolved. There's no room for improvement when no one's willing to take accountability in a relationship, when no one's willing to listen, when no one's willing to talk. Yeah, it's a really sad state that relationships as a whole are in, you know. And in this day and age, if you're able to be in a relationship where you truly have a good man or a good woman, you know, and that relationship truly is of God, hold on to that relationship for their life. Could as good as they are as men or as women, you guys are gonna have disagreement. At the end of the day, you're still two individuals. So there are going to be times where you will butt heads, where you will not necessarily agree with everything. But that's why it's so important that you get through the nitty gritty stuff as soon as possible, especially when it comes to how you prefer your home to be run, how you prefer to raise your kids. You know, those of you who have a relationship with God, or you're like a Christian or what have you, who believes in God and worship God, you know, those conversations with your partner needs to be had. You know, how you raise your children, the beliefs that you have, how you run your household. All of these things are so important that you have them as early on as possible. Like, don't be afraid of these type of conversations, because even those things, you'd be very surprised how those can be the catalyst of someone stepping out of their relationship, out of their marriage. And again, not condoning it, but this conversation isn't about whether what's right or what's wrong. This conversation is about things that do happen in relationships and things that can happen in relationships if one is not careful. You know, and anyone who unfortunately ends up in a predicament, whether they're the person who stepped out or the person who got stepped out on, but the two truly love each other, especially if you've got a family, you know, all I can advise is, like, if you guys truly still want that relationship to work, don't allow family members, friends, or what have you to dictate your relationship. At the end of the day, they may give their opinion, but you're the one that has to deal with whatever decision that you make, whether it is to stay or whether it is to go. You know, providing this has nothing to do with like domestic violence or anything like that. You know, if you know for the fact that a person is a good man or a good woman, and they messed up badly by stepping out, if you honestly believe that that you guys together can get past it, but obviously it will require a lot of prayer, a lot of counseling. Trust has to be earned and built back up. Then do it. At the end of the day, this is your marriage. You know, and again, your friends, your family members may mean well, but at the end of the day, they're not the one that has to deal with your marriage. You do. So if you guys genuinely want to work it out, then both of you put the effort into working out. Yes, one person to step out, but the same way they have to put in the effort to earn your trust back, you have to put in the willingness to trust them. You have to allow them the time to actually earn your trust back, so it does go both ways. You know, and this is something that I've learned. Like, granted, I'm not married myself, but as I get older and just speak to people more, I see things from a different perspective. So just wanted to share my thoughts, and I hope this helps someone. Hi again. There was something that I actually wanted to add on that I only remembered after I entered the last video or the last clip. So another thing that, you know, I think most people know about but don't want to admit to, that plays a role in infidelity in relationships, is the lack of intimacy between themselves and their partner. And this is a conversation that most people don't like having because they kind of see it as, I don't know if victim blaming is the right term to use in this instance, but essentially putting blame on the other partner, the other spouse, usually the woman, and with the full acknowledgement that there are going to be situations where, you know, for a season, intimacy may not be the same or may dwindle. So, like, when children come into the mix, you're not going to have the same amount of time and energy that you once had than when it was just the two of you. And that goes both ways, but obviously, physically, it's more demanding on a woman because she's the one, obviously, that carries the child and does the breastfeeding. And for, like, most households, sorry, she would be the one that's like maintaining the upkeep of the household as well as looking after the children. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule with that. But even with that, I've seen and heard from a lot of women, they kind of have a tendency to use that as a crutch. And I say that with no disrespect, and again, I acknowledge that I myself am not married, much less have children. So, of course, it's a lot easier for me to make such comments. But, the same way how, when children do come into the equation, the man is still expected to fulfill his role as the husband, as the father, as this, as that. Meanwhile, having to adapt to new dynamics. The reality is the expectation is still there for women as well. It's unfair to have an expectation that men should still maintain everything they were doing prior to children coming into the mix, despite the new adjustment and changes on their end. But, exceptions must be made for women. No, it goes both ways. Both men and women have to adapt to children coming into the mix when it comes to like quality time with one another, their intimacy. They both have to actively make time. It's not just one person makes all the effort. Both sides have to make the effort, and both sides have to acknowledge the change that their partners have had to make. The man has to acknowledge that, what, his girlfriend, his wife has just had a child, so she needs that time to adjust, to recover, to adapt to the new, like, way that she has to live her life as now both a wife and mother, or girlfriend and mother, the same way, and then like the nurturer, of course, the same way how the woman has to acknowledge and take into consideration that now he's having to adapt as now the husband and father, or boyfriend and father, and still be provided. And not only that, whereas before both of you were working, now he's having to take on the role of two people, of also having to like bring in the income that he makes, and in addition, the income that you were making before, he now has to accommodate that until you as a woman go back into work. So both individuals make sacrifices in a relationship, and both individuals have to adapt. And there almost seems to be like a competition to be like, well, women have to do all of this when this happens, and then completely disregard the sacrifices that men have to make, and vice versa. Oh, well, as a man, I'm having to do X, Y, and Z, but they're not taking in consideration the things that the woman has had to sacrifice and, change, and how it affects her mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and the same for men. We, as women, don't take into consideration how, you know, when all the pressure is now put on him to provide not only for himself, not only for us as the woman, but now for the child, and in some instances, children, because some people have like multiple kids. That's a lot of pressure for a man to be under. And the same way men don't take into consideration the pressures that we go through as women in that type of dynamic, is the same that we as women don't truly take consideration when it comes to the man. So, even stuff like that, the lack of intimacy, not just sex. There's various forms of intimacy as well, but we don't make the time for that. We don't keep it up. That's another thing for some of us. When we enter relationships, we do all that nasty, freaky sexual stuff, and we just expect that because our circumstances have changed, that because that person loves us, they just have to accept it and adapt. And it's like, well, we also have to remember that that's not what they signed up for. That's not how we presented ourselves. And by I'm talking both men and women. That's not what we brought to the table when we initially got with them. That's not how we presented ourselves. That's not what they became accustomed to. So if you're someone who cannot maintain that freaky sexual persona like long term, then just don't do it. If it's a situation where you're going through a particular season where there's a bit of a drought, then just have open conversations about it. Like, try to find some form of middle ground. Like, have conversations like, is there something that your partner can do to, like, I guess bring the groove back? But that doesn't really happen. People just stop doing things like they used to do, and because their partner loves them, because they're already married to them, that the person should just accept that. Like, that's not fair, because it's roles were reversed. Would you just accept that sudden change with your partner? You wouldn't think that's fair, so you can't have that expectation when it comes to your partner either. That's just not right. Why not talk it out? Why not try to work towards getting back to how you guys were when it was like the first year of your relationship, the first 2 years of your relationship? Obviously, things can never 100% be the same, because obviously you have kids. Of course, that's a permanent change. But that doesn't mean that you stop. Like, you becoming a mother or you becoming a father, that doesn't mean that now you stop being a husband and wife. You're still a husband and wife. You're still boyfriend and girlfriend. You still have obligations and a role to play to your partner. And you've got a lot of people who listen to terrible advice, saying that, oh, it's all about the kids. Remember, your kids are going to grow up and they're going to leave. Yes, your children are a priority, but that doesn't mean they become a priority over your husband or your wife. They are of a high priority. It's a different type of priority. Your husband, your wife, your relationship, your marriage is still a priority, and that shouldn't be neglected because of that. Focus on your specific relationship and be mindful of taking generic advice from people who don't know anything about the dynamics of your relationship. Talk things out. Again, pray, seek counsel from God. And if this is your marriage, you should do everything possible to stand and fight for it.